So anyway, if you're following the handout, I'm starting on the 4th paragraph. Mindfulness is a skillful way of relating to the 4th paragraph. Okay, so first I'll just do a reading. The benefits of mindfulness. Mindfulness is a skillful way of relating to and connecting to life and daily experience. It is paying attention on purpose in the present moment and in a non-judgmental way. It is a way of being, and it takes practice. It is calm attention to what is happening from moment to moment without discrimination or criticism. It is the observing power of the mind that sees without the filter of desire or aversion, liking or disliking, or delusional reaction. It is therefore a wholesome way of seeing what is happening in the present moment. Mindful breathing or hand movements brings the mind home to the body. You begin to experience calmness, a sense of well-being and quiet joy. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. This helps our concentration and focus, and we begin to appreciate the fact of being alive instead of being distracted and confused by compulsive thinking. Now, this knowing that we speak about is intuitive knowing. It's not intellectual knowing. Because intellectual knowing is based on thinking and memory and information. But intuitive knowing is very different. For example, when we breathe in mindfully, we know we're breathing in, don't we? When we breathe out, we know we're breathing out. It's like when you're hungry or you're tired, you know you're hungry or tired, right? You don't have to think about it. And if you have to go to the washroom, you know you have to go. It's a natural intelligence. It's like if you're crossing the road, you look right, left, right, and you know when it's safe to cross, right? And if you're driving, you know when to stop, when to turn right, when to turn left. And if you're changing lanes, you know when it is safe to change lane. It's a natural intelligence. So this is why awareness, mindfulness, and knowing, they go together. It's a part of our Buddha nature. Mindful walking helps us to be in the present moment, and we can appreciate the beauty of the environment. Of course, it's nice to walk outside too and appreciate the nature. We can stop and smell the roses and experience the joy of just being alive. Mindful eating in silence is a peaceful activity, and we can appreciate the food much more. When we're eating and talking, what we're talking about becomes more important than the food. The food becomes a secondary thing. Mindful cleaning, cooking, and washing helps us to enjoy doing these activities instead of being in a hurry to finish them so that we can do other things. Present moment, wonderful moment. With mindfulness and calm focus, we can deal with our own suffering, our anxiety, fear, and worry, frustration, irritation, anger, resentment, sadness, and sorrow. You can embrace your mental, emotional upset and take care of it with compassion, kind acceptance, and patience. Mindful breathing can help us to stop thinking about the past with regret and guilt, and stop thinking about the future with anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. We're able to experience tranquility and stillness, which is most beneficial and precious in our busy and stressful lives. Mindfulness has the power to heal past traumas and conflicts because it's a state of non-duality, And so one is able to be objective and see things as they are without identifying with them and let them go. So soon I'll be speaking about this, about the nature of non-duality. Mindfulness also helps us not to react to unpleasant words and situations, and not to take things so personally. A great deal of our mental energy is caught up in habitual reactions. It is our reactions which make us burn out, which throws us off balance, and cause us suffering and discontent, dis-ease. Things get better in our lives when we react less and less. We can remain calm and patient, wise, strong, and secure. Then we can respond in a beneficial way and be helpful to others. Our basic problem in life is that we take things too personally, even things that are not directly related to us. This is an aspect of ignorance and delusion. Meditation is much more than you think. And with mindfulness, we're able to appreciate the difference between reacting and responding. There's a difference. Reacting and responding. Because when we just react habitually, we're thrown off balance, right? If something is pleasant, then we react in a positive way. We feel good. But if something is unpleasant, then we react and we get upset. Or we get angry, or you start feeling nervous, right? Some nervousness. But when we learn not to react, we are more calm and focused. So then we can respond, we can act in a very beneficial way. You see the difference? Say if somebody needs your help, or a good example, a child, right? You see a child playing and the child is in danger of hurting themselves. You respond immediately. You see the difference between reacting and responding, or reacting in a beneficial way. It's a big difference. Our lives are not determined by what happens to us, but by how we react to what happens. Not by what life brings to us, but by our attitude we bring to life. The world is as it is. Life is constantly changing and uncertain. A calm and positive attitude brings a chain reaction of positive thoughts, events, and outcomes. It is a catalyst, a spark that creates extraordinary and surprising results. Events do not cause us suffering. They may cause us physical discomfort or some inconvenience and delay. It is our mental, emotional reaction to those events that cause us suffering. Upset, anger, frustration, anxiety, and despair. And you can see what happened, when the pandemic came. Really, it's, of course, it was something new, something very rare. But you see how people reacted, and how did you react to it? So there's something we can learn from this experience. And as you know, many people, because they did not have mindfulness practice, they easily became, paranoid. And a good example is the media and the politicians. Not only in Malaysia, but many countries, it happened to them too. The media, the politicians, they just created more and more fear, paranoia. And they didn't care how it was affecting the people. Because, that's the nature of the media, isn't it? Their number one mandate is always about ratings, ratings. The same thing happened in North America too, because the media in North America is very, very strong, even stronger than here. So much fear, so much paranoia, but they didn't care. It's all about ratings. And this is why it's so healthy to avoid the media as much as you can, And this happened recently in Sri Lanka. Maybe you've heard a lot of bad news about Sri Lanka recently, and I was there in Sri Lanka. But I rarely watch the news. Because if you watch the news, you get the impression that the entire country, is chaotic, it's falling apart. But what they're showing you is just protest demonstrations in Colombo, the capital. But the rest of the country was very calm, very quiet. Yes, there are problems in Sri Lanka, but it's not as desperate, as the media makes it out to be. The media is very, very unhealthy. It causes delusion. So in Sri Lanka, instead of watching the news, I would just look at the nature, and look at the birds, and I look at the monkeys. Lots of wild monkeys in Sri Lanka. And they have no idea, what is happening in the human world. And, with all the corrupt politicians, they have no idea, and of course they don't care. So watching monkeys was a very good practice. Without mindfulness, we are enslaved and deluded by mental activity, by too much thinking. This is a source of dukkha, mental emotional disturbance. We believe that to follow our impulses and to satisfy our desires and expectations is freedom. This is an illusion. In fact, we're slaves to craving, clinging, frustration, fear, and despair. In mindfulness, one is not only restful, calm, and happy, but alert and awake. Meditation is not an evasion or escape. It is clear and serene encounter with reality. The secret of life is revealed when we're living in harmony with changes and motions of life. When you're not constantly struggling to change what is. Patience and acceptance are the key to peace, compassion, wisdom, and freedom. Wisdom is being and accepting who you are and seeing things as they are without reacting to it. Our minds are conditioned to react. Our brains are programmed, educated to label, judge, criticize, condemn, compare, to like or dislike, to want or not to want, to have aversion and ill will. This is a conditioning of our mental defilements. So this is the cause of our conflicts, discontentment, disharmony, and dis-ease. The idea of a permanent, unchanging ego center or self is strengthened by this conditioning. And it is this deep-rooted illusion of a permanent, concrete, and separate ego entity which is the source and cause of our problems and conflicts, fears and worries, craving, greed, and attachments. With mindfulness, we can skillfully deal with our thoughts and emotions. With objective awareness of our mental landscape, we can see thoughts and feelings as just thoughts and feelings. Moods and emotions are just moods and emotions. We can see and understand their impermanent, changing, and uncertain nature, and can therefore let them go, thus freeing the mind of suffering and dis-ease. And now I would like to speak to you about the nature of non-duality. Awareness or mindfulness is a state of non-duality. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is no I, no self, that's being aware or being mindful. There's only that energy of attention. Now, initially, we don't see this. Why? Because we're just so used to identifying with our experiences, right? No, we say, I'm seeing something, right? I'm hearing something, I'm smelling something, I'm tasting something, I'm feeling something by touch, and of course I'm thinking something. So there's a duality. Duality means subject and object, right? Subject and object. But initially, for example, when you're seeing is automatic, isn't it? If your eyes are healthy, all you have to do is just look and there's seeing. Likewise with hearing. As long as your ears are healthy, you just hear, right? You don't have to make an effort to hear the speaker. It just happens, isn't it? Just like smelling. Automatically you smell something. And a good example, you start to eat something and automatically there's tasting. But then, because of our habit, we say, I'm tasting the food. I like it or I don't like it. Or it needs more chili. It needs more chili sauce. Or it's too salty, We create a duality between the taster and the food. Do you see that? Whereas initially, there's only tasting. Okay, later on when you're having lunch, say to yourself, okay, I am going to eat this now, right? And I'm going to try not to taste the food. Try it at lunchtime. See what happens. Try not to taste the food. Whether you like it or not, tasting will arise, right? As long as you have taste buds on your tongue, tasting will arise, tasting consciousness. It's automatic. There's no one behind it. Just like seeing, there's no one behind seeing. And this is one of the insights of the Buddha. He realized that the senses were actually sensing by themselves, right? But when we say, like I'm seeing a tree, initially there's just the seeing and the awareness of the tree. But then when you say, I am seeing the tree, and it's a mango tree or durian tree, then you create a duality between a seer and observer separate from the tree. Do you see that? When you say, I am seeing the tree, first there's a duality, right? Subject, object, right? The I is the subject. That's simple, isn't it? So you think now that I'm a seer, I'm an observer, that is seeing the tree. Now, when you're on a retreat, you can see this more easily because, on a retreat, you're very calm, you're very present, and you can see this. But I know initially it's not easy, but once you see it, it's so clear. Just like hearing. Hearing is automatic. But when you say, I'm hearing that sound, I like it or it's too noisy lah. It's disturbing. We create the duality between a hearer or a listener separate from the sound. Do you see that? But really, initially, there's only hearing, right? But when you say, I am hearing, and you react to the sound, then you create the idea that there's a hearer or a listener that is hearing the sound. But actually, there's no hearer or listener hearing the sound. There's only the hearing. If you can't see this now, you'll see it later. But the thing is to understand the nature of duality, subject and object. And so awareness, mindfulness, there is no I, no self that is actually being aware or being mindful. There's only that energy of awareness. The attention is there. There's only an awareness, an energy. So because it's a state of non-duality, It gives us the ability to see something as it is. For example, anger arises, an upset. And by habit we say, I am angry or I am upset, right? So when we identify with that emotion, we create a duality, right? I and the anger, right? Subject, object. Whereas initially, there's only that anger, that upset. It's like happiness. A happy feeling arises, we say, I am happy. Seems perfectly natural. Unhappy feeling arises, we say, I am unhappy. Right? Or I'm upset, or I'm lonely, I'm bored, I'm afraid, and so on. So when we identify with an emotion, we hold on to it as something personal. My anger, my upset, my fear, my frustration, even desire, my desire. We hold on to it. And that's one of the causes of dukkha. Because the Buddha is saying that as human beings, we have the unfortunate habit of identifying with things that are impermanent, including the body. This is me, this is my body. But whatever we identify with, as mine, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, it's impermanent. It's subject to change. And that's one of the causes of dukkha, because we're holding on to something which is subject to change, which includes the body and other people also. And of course, material things, and of course, our mental states and our emotions. So this is why in Dhamma practice, we learn how to objectify these states. Instead of saying, I am angry or I'm upset, we say, there is anger, or there's a state of anger, or there is upset. You see the difference? There's a big difference in saying, I am angry or I'm upset, and there is anger, there is upset. Big difference. You're able to see it as it is. So there's some space there. Awareness gives you that space to see something objectively as it is. Whereas when you're grasping at it, I am angry, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, there's no space there because you're holding on to it as mine, my experience. Just like my happiness, my unhappiness. This is the psychotherapy of the Dhamma. And they're using this now in modern psychotherapy. They're calling it mindfulness-based psychotherapy. Something that the Buddha taught over 2,500 years ago. It's amazing when you think of it. Even desire. There is desire, a state of desire. Not I want this or I must have this. Because normally that is our habit, right? You objectify the feeling, the emotion, and you remind yourself it is impermanent. Only a temporary mental state, a changing condition of the mind. And you can say easily, this too shall pass. Maybe you've heard this phrase before, this too shall pass. These 4 words, this too shall pass, contain the greatest wisdom in human experience. This too shall pass. I remember when I first heard about the pandemic, I remembered that phrase. Yes, it's very serious, it's very rare, very scary, but this too shall pass. It always does. It has to. And whatever we're experiencing in the moment, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, is only a temporary mental state. It will change. Good thing to remember. Not only that all things are impermanent and subject to change, but also our problems. Whatever we think, our problems or difficulties, they too will change. That is great wisdom. And also what is interesting, when we identify with, say, happiness, I am happy. There is no dukkha, is there? I am happy. Because it feels good, right? It's pleasant. But when you say, I am unhappy, right? Or I'm sad, or I'm depressed, I'm upset, there is dukkha. Why? Because it's unpleasant. Right? A happy feeling is pleasant, the other feelings are unpleasant. Very interesting. But whether something is pleasant or unpleasant, the wisdom teaches us, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And there is a reason why everything has to change. And the reason is our human existence, or human incarnation. We have physical phenomena and mental phenomena. Maybe you've heard this teaching before. It's called Rupa and Nama in Pali. Rupa and Nama, physical and mental. And that's what we really are, a process of body and mind. And we're alive because we're a process, right? Very complex, but that's why we're alive. If we were not a process, we wouldn't be alive. But the interesting thing is that we keep overlooking this fact, this basic fact. Why? Because we're social creatures, and we use language, right? We use names and we use language. I, you, he, she, Mr. Go, Miss Tan, and so on. So we tend to see each other as personalities, right? Selves, egos. And on the social level, yes, we're personalities, we're egos. And some egos are bigger than some, right? But at a deeper level, we are this process of body and mind, Rupa and Nama. And this is one of the practices in the forest tradition. You can see Rupa and Nama very clearly. Because, you're calm, you're very present. It's a very powerful teaching, and yet it's so basic. Rupa and Nama, the process. And because we're a process, everything changes, right? Whatever we experience, it changes. And of course, we have to keep recharging this process, don't we? Right? Like a rechargeable battery. We have to keep recharging this process, right? Eating, drinking, breathing, of course, exercising, and so on. That's right, we're rechargeable batteries. Rupa and Nama, Nama, Rupa, Rupa, Nama. So in truth, we're all Rupa Namas, right? We're all Rupa Namas. Everyone. And whether you're rich or poor, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're Prime Minister, President, the Queen of England, it's all Rupa Nama, Nama Rupa. You see that? And because we're all the same process, we're all subject to sickness, aging, and death. As you know, the Queen of England, right? She's been a queen for what, 70 years, so long. But eventually, she had to pass away. It's a very powerful teaching. And interesting, you know, the digestion process is extremely complex. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about it, right? We just eat, makan, and we go about our business because the body has the intelligence to take care of this complexity. Very complex. And I only learned about it because many years ago when I was in college, university, I took a half-year course in biochemistry. And that's what we learned, the digestion process. And only then I began to realize how complex the digestion process is. You know, so many enzymes and acids are at work to break the food down. Very complex, so the food can absorb the nutrition, right? And then expel the rest. So unless you have a serious digestion problem, we don't think about it. The body has that intelligence. But if you have a very serious digestion problem, then you have to take care of it. I once met somebody working in India for a long time, and she had a serious digestion problem. And she had to go on a long fast, like 1 month. Can you imagine 1 month? Just to give the body a complete rest. So this process could come back to normal. So this is a very powerful teaching of realizing body and mind. For example, just breathing, just the sensation of the breath when you're mindful, that is the body, right? The physical process, physical phenomena. And the awareness of the breathing and the sensation is the mind. You see body and you see mind. Physical and mental. Nama, rupa. As I said, when you're on a retreat, you can see this more easily. And the hand movements we did, it's even easier to see this than the breath. You know, the hands moving and touching, that is the body, the physical, and the awareness of the hands moving and touching, that is the mind, right? You see rupa and nama very clearly. Just like walking, you can see it clearly in walking too, right? The feet moving and touching is the physical, and the awareness of the feet moving and touching is the mind. It's only body and mind. Even washing your dish, you can see it. You see physical and mental when you're washing. Likewise with eating. If you're eating mindfully, hopefully at lunch, you eat mindfully. The tasting, the chewing, the swallowing, that is the physical. And the awareness of the chewing, tasting, and swallowing is the mind. So when you're mindful, you can see rupa and nama very clearly. Body and mind process. Very powerful teaching. And yet it is so, it is so direct. It's a very basic, direct teaching, but very powerful teaching. And interestingly, normally when there's a death, we usually say somebody dies, somebody passes away, don't we? Well, that is the social convention, social language. Somebody dies, somebody passes away. But there's a deeper truth. Is this rupa nama, the nama rupa, the process simply shuts down. You understand? It simply stops working. And at a deeper level, you have the 5 aggregates, right? You know the 5 aggregates, some of you? The 5 factors that create experience. Maybe later I'll speak about this. There are 5 things that create our normal experience. But on that deeper level of the 5 factors, these 5 factors simply stop working. Very powerful teaching. Another good mindfulness practice of objectifying emotions is called mindful breathing and smiling. And it's very good. For example, breathing in, I know there's fear in me. Breathing out, I smile, and you smile. Breathing in, I know there's upset in me. Breathing out, I smile, and you smile at it. Breathing in, I know there's craving in me. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I know there's frustration in me. Breathing out, I smile, and so on. Because when you can breathe and smile at something, it's a very wholesome state of mind. You know, when you smile, it feels good, doesn't it? It's a wholesome state of mind. And it helps you to relax. And it is a smile of loving kindness, of metta, when you can smile at something, because you're not judging it, all right? You're not criticizing it. There's no liking or disliking, aversion. You accept it is there. That is metta. You smile at it. And that's why it's such a wholesome state of mind. And you smile at it. And then you say, this too shall pass. It's impermanent. It's a temporary mental state. A changing condition of the mind. And then later on in the Qigong, there's one of the movements where we do the smiling, and you can laugh also. That's why in India they're doing laughing yoga. Have you heard of laughing yoga? It's very good. Just type laughing yoga on YouTube. See groups of Indians meeting in the morning, in the park, and they just laugh and laugh and laugh. Very good therapy. Because you release so much stress, frustration, and so on. You know the old saying, laughter is the best medicine. It's true. maybe the young people haven't heard this one. Laughter is the best medicine. Oh, smiling. Smiling is good medicine. Very wholesome. Now, as we said, mindfulness also helps us not to react so readily, because we're so conditioned to react from childhood. We're always reacting. And that's why the Buddha said, when you see, just see. When you hear, just hear. Very radical teaching. It sounds simple, but as you know, it's not easy to practice because we're always reacting. So it takes practice when you stop reacting. And when you learn how to not to react so easily, you begin to see the benefits of it and the freedom of it. And in my own practice, I've had maybe 3 or 4 monks who got angry with me over some simple thing. But they were not practicing in a beneficial way, and they just got angry. And I found it a good opportunity to do this practice, not reacting. Just breathe and smile. And when you don't react to somebody's anger, you act like a mirror, You act like a mirror that reflects their anger. Can you see that? Because you're not reacting, that person realizes their behavior, that they're suffering. Because you're not reacting, so you're reflecting their behavior, right? Especially with family. Try that with your family next time. You know, when they're upset or wanting to just keep calm and smile at them. You see the difference. And as I said, there are ways of practicing. Like the one I just showed. Just breathe, focus on the hands, breathe and focus, and just smile to yourself and don't react to that person. Because when we react in daily life, which is what we do by habit, we are always creating our own reality. You understand? We create our own reality, our own mental, emotional reality. And we think it's real, this is the real thing, but actually it's not. Most of the time, we're deluded by our own habitual reactions. We create our own reality. And this, of course, is something that the Buddha realized when he became awakened. And there is something called delusion on a mass scale. A good example is when people are watching, spectator sports, right? Where hundreds, thousands of people are watching a game, say football or soccer. And normally, you're supporting one team, right? And you want that team to win. Or if two people are playing, say, badminton, right? You want one player to win. And of course, if Malaysia is playing Indonesia, of course, you want the Indonesian player to win. I watched some of those matches between Malaysia and Indonesia, and the crowd is going crazy. Right? They're so passionate, right? You always want your team to win. And if your team is winning, my goodness, you're so happy, right? But if your team is losing, what happens, right? You're so upset. You're so, suffering, and you think this is so important. And we forget that it's a game. Yeah, we forget it's a bloody game. People kicking a ball from left to right, or people hitting, a shuttlecock over and it. We forget. And in World Cup soccer, when people are betting now thousands and even millions of dollars, can you imagine in World Cup soccer? It's no longer a game, right? But it's delusion. Very strong delusion. Just like when you keep watching the news. I had a friend in Canada, he kept watching the news constantly, on his smartphone because he's addicted to his smartphone, the news during the pandemic. And he's so scared, so worried. And so when I got COVID, he thought I was going to die, and I kept telling him to relax, I'll be okay. And he wanted to take me to a doctor, but I refused. Because I was having fever and chills, and I was having this thing called brain fog. I don't know if you ever heard of it, brain fog. Some people got it and some people didn't. But this brain fog is very unusual, because I didn't know I had a fever and chills. He only told me later because he came to visit me, trying to get me to a doctor. And I kept refusing, and I say, don't worry, I'll be okay. But he was too scared because he's always watching the news. But it is unusual because normally when, say, you have a fever or a headache, you know you have a fever or a headache, right? But when you have brain fog, you don't know anything. And I didn't even remember him coming to see me and trying to get me to the hospital. Very amazing. Then he came back the following day. I told him the same thing. I don't want to go to hospital. I'll be okay. Don't worry. But he's so scared, I'm going to die now. He got 2 people to speak to me on WhatsApp. Of course, I don't remember. They're only telling me this later. And apparently I said to those people on WhatsApp and my friend who was visiting, I said to them, everyone should just keep calm. Everyone should just keep calm. Now, I don't remember saying that, but it's something I would have said anyway. It was coming from my subconscious. But he was so worried, and he's so frustrated because I refused to go see a doctor. In desperation, he called emergency number. And in North America, it's 911. So the next day now, when I'm feeling more conscious, the brain fog had lifted. To my surprise, 2 paramedics showed up. You know paramedics, right? They came in the ambulance. Because my friend had called emergency. But by then I was recovering, because the fever and the chills that was causing the brain fog, it had lifted, it had gone. That was very interesting, but I kept calm through the whole thing. Yeah, so this practice of not reacting, it's something very, very beneficial if you can practice, but it takes effort, of course. And there's a classic story, maybe you've heard of it, where the Buddha was giving a teaching in the forest, of course, and something he said made this man very, very angry, very upset. And the man stood up and he started to shout at the Buddha and cursing him all the bad words he could think of in his language at the Buddha. So people looked to the Buddha to see how he would react or deal with this very deluded, angry man. And the Buddha just sat calmly and smiled at him. No reaction. And the man got even more angry because he expected the Buddha, to argue with him. Because he was ready for an argument, you see. But the Buddha just smiled at him. And eventually he just stood there, huffing and puffing, because by then he was exhausted. And he ran out of all the bad words he could think of. Because every language has so many bad words, right? Totally mystified, totally confused, and he's wondering, what kind of person is this Buddha? Just sitting there smiling. And he's thinking, maybe he's retarded or something. He has some mental problem. Because he had never met somebody like that. So calm, so peaceful. So then the Buddha said to him, tell me, sir, if somebody is offering you a gift, a present, and you don't accept it, who would the gift belong to? And the man was initially surprised, that the Buddha would ask him such a rational question, especially after, his irrational behavior. And then he thought for a moment and he says, well, since I have refused to accept the gift that somebody's offering, then of course it would still belong to the person who is offering the gift, right? A rational answer to a rational question. And then the Buddha said, well, sir, in the same way, I have not accepted your anger and all your bad words, and so they all belong to you. I have not accepted your anger and all your curse words, and they all belong to you. What an amazing answer. And because it was such an amazing answer, the man suddenly had an awakening. He became aware of his own mental state, and he realized all along the problem was not the Buddha, but his own mind. And how he reacted, became angry. You were deluded. And of course, there was some ego, some ego pride there, the arrogance. It's a wonderful story, very wonderful. So as we said, when we want to understand our mental defilements, and we all have them, because we're conditioned, it's a part of our conditioning, then it's good to reflect how they come about. Because we're educated, as we said, our minds are educated, programmed actually, to label, judge, criticize, compare, condemn, to like, not to like, to want, not to want, to have aversion, right? To have aversion, ill will. And aversion includes, of course, hatred, disrespect, jealousy. The interesting thing about envy and jealousy, there's a difference, but they're related. Envy is wanting something that somebody has, right? So it's a form of craving, right? Desire, wanting. And jealousy is resenting that person, hating that person to have something that you would like to have, right? So in other words, jealousy is envy plus hate or resentment. Very interesting. And it's a part of our conditioning. And in some people it's stronger than in some. And as you know, the Buddha taught about the 4 sublime states. And one of them is mudita, sympathetic joy, where you can be happy for that person instead of feeling envious or jealous. And it's a very great virtue, the virtue of sympathetic joy, because the ego is not there. And you're not comparing yourself. So there's no envy, no jealousy, no conflict. So if somebody has a new house, new car, or they won the lottery, which is more dramatic, you can be happy for them. It's a great virtue. And you can see that normally the future, as you know, is uncertain. And this is why the more we obsess about the future, we naturally experience more fear, more anxiety, right? More frustration. And what was most challenging about the pandemic, as you all know, is the pandemic added more uncertainty, right, than the normal uncertainty of the unknown future. Because we didn't know exactly how dangerous it was. We didn't know whether we're going to get it. We didn't know if we were going to survive it or not. And of course, we didn't know how long it was going to last, right? How long it was going to last. So really, I would like to congratulate all of you that you're able to manage. Because in situations like that, you really have to practice not only patience, mindfulness, but what we call patient endurance. Patient endurance. It's a very challenging practice, but if you can do it, it's worth it. Patient endurance and acceptance, right? Because a pandemic is totally out of our control, right? As you know. Because normally you think you're in control, right? You can do what you like, etc. Especially if you're energetic, you're healthy. And suddenly, you have no control. And of course, if the government is paranoid, of course, they behave in a very crazy way. Even that you have to accept. And some countries, the governments were more sensible, less paranoid. Even Canada, they're still paranoid in Canada. Although it's modern, developed country, but the politicians, obviously no mindfulness, right? They're still paranoid, although the rest of the countries now are relaxing. The Canadian government is still paranoid. And the politicians in Australia, they were the worst. Even UK also, terrible. But at least in the UK, there's the freedom to criticize them in public, on radio, but not in other countries. And as you may know, the state of Victoria, Melbourne, the government there, the state government, they're the most paranoid, and they had the longest lockdown period. Although their infection rate was, fairly low compared to other places. Total paranoia. And the interesting thing, of course, is their main concern was not the people. It's about their own political image and their political career. That was the number one agenda. But that's the nature of human ignorance, delusion. And then you have somebody like President of the United States, Donald Trump. Total immaturity. He didn't take it seriously at all. He pretended like it didn't matter. And the president of Brazil was just like him. Their main concern through the whole pandemic was their popularity. Can you imagine? They're supposed to be leading and guiding the country, but their main concern was their own popularity. Show you how immature they were. And for the Americans now, or the sensible ones, it's a big embarrassment that they had a president like that. But it's a part of human nature. Ignorance, delusion. And ignorance is mainly about clinging to ego, the self-view, the attachment to self when it is so strong. Always your number one concern. But it's a strong conditioning in the mind, very strong, the nature of self. Now, at this time, are there any questions? Any questions about mindfulness practice, about non-duality, dealing with emotions?
You spoke about non-duality, but nature itself has this duality in terms of like hot and cold, that kind of thing. How to reconcile that?
Okay. No, we're not speaking about that kind of duality. I'm talking about the duality that's in the mind. The duality that's created in the mind. When we aware of something, there's no I being aware or being mindful. There's only that energy of attention. No, as I said, initially we don't see that, but when you start to practice, you begin to see it. And when you're on a retreat, it's easier because then you're more calm, right? You're more present. And you're not holding on to your smartphone. The smartphone is a big distraction. It's really unfortunate, but the smartphone is actually making people more anxious. Have you noticed that? Yes, it's fast, it's convenient, you can do magic with this thing, but it's making human beings more anxious and more impatient. Because when you're anxious, you're not patient, right? You want instant things, so fast, fast, fast. And believe me, patience is a great virtue, but we don't value patience anymore, right? We don't see it as a virtue. Now, as soon as possible. This is why patience, and especially regarding the pandemic, patient endurance, acceptance was a great practice. Challenging, yes, but it's one of the, how would you say, it's one of the most virtuous practice when you can practice that. And it's something I had to do when I was in Sri Lanka. 10 months, my main practice was patient endurance and acceptance. Because previously I had wonderful experiences in Sri Lanka, but this time when I went there, I realized, bad idea. I should not have gone back to Sri Lanka at this stage in my life. I'm more sensitive to the humid heat and the limited food choices. And it's something you'll never experience in Malaysia, right? Because the variety of food here is so wonderful. But I'm sure you all take it for granted. I don't take it for granted. Because 10 months, my main food every day was Sri Lankan rice and curry. I had no choice. Unless I cook myself, but cooking myself was too much trouble. Can you imagine, even your favorite dish, can you imagine if you eat your favorite dish every day, even twice a day, what happens after a few days, right? You want something else. But I had to eat Sri Lankan rice and curry for 10 months. And I had to deal with the heat. And things are not so modern there. I had a fan, I had AC, air con sometimes, but then we had power cuts. And sometimes power cuts were really long. 1 hour is not so bad, or even 2 hours, you can manage, but sometimes it was like 5, 6 hours, no power. And of course, I had to stay. I couldn't leave Sri Lanka because I made a commitment, and my friend had got me a visa extension, 9 more months. So I'd made the commitment, and I had to stay, and I think I just had to make the best of it. Had to make the best of it. And you can imagine, I was thinking about Malaysian makan all the time. Because, the variety here is so amazing. And when people are saying, they're watching the bad news, right, about Sri Lanka, they say, Bhante, you must get out, try and leave. I said, it will be okay, it will be okay. Of course, I avoid the news. Unfortunately, where I was staying, very calm, very quiet. Every day, despite the challenges people were facing, they were bringing dana every day. Breakfast dana, lunch dana. I really admired them, how devoted they were, how kind, devoted they were. But again, the news is really a delusion because it distorts your perception about a country, right? You get the impression that the whole country is what you're seeing on the news. You know, the protests and the demonstrations and all these things. And they're telling you about, you know, the bankruptcy, the corrupt politicians, etc., etc., etc. While I was in a very calm, quiet place, and I'm looking at the birds and the monkeys, you know, looking at the birds and the monkeys. Yes.
Sorry, Bhante. Since you say that there's the non-duality, can you elaborate on free will, please? Free will.
Okay. Yes, I know initially it's not easy to see because the way we use language and our habit of identifying with an experience is duality, right? You know, as I said, I'm seeing something, I'm hearing, smelling, I'm happy, I'm not happy. You know, I'm this, I'm that. I'm thinking, I'm feeling something. That use of language creates duality, meaning subject and object, right? You see that now. And the I is always the subject, isn't it? The I is always the subject. So we get the impression that I is separate. Is separate from what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm smelling, what I'm tasting, what I'm feeling, and of course what I'm thinking. And we believe, out of that duality, we believe that there's a thinker separate from thoughts, right? When you say, I'm thinking this or I'm thinking that, or I shouldn't be thinking that, or I should be thinking more positive, and so on. We believe that there's a thinker separate from thoughts. Very natural to feel that. But when you begin to practice and you calm your mind, you begin to see that the thinker, the I, the thinker, is not separate from thoughts. It's a part of thinking. Okay, let's try a simple experiment in mindfulness. Just close your eyes for a moment and just think these three thoughts. Slowly, mindfully. I am thinking. Again, I am thinking. One more time, I am thinking. I am thinking. You see that the I is a thought. The I is thought. Am is a thought. Thinking is a thought. So I am thinking. There are three thoughts there. Do you see that? In other words, the I, as a thinker, is not separate from thoughts. It's just thinking. When you say, I am thinking, it's just thinking. Can you see that? Yeah. It's profound, but once you see it, it's so clear. Don't worry, you'll get it. You'll become enlightened one day. Slowly, slowly, no hurry. Slowly, slowly. Patience, patience. Great virtue. Yes.
Is it okay to say that a non-duality is like a camera capturing an image, and a duality is like a microscope going into the details? An image is just an image.
Yes.
A camera will capture it,
Yes.
just an image. So that's non-duality. A duality is whereby you go into the details and you start to analyze it. So it's like a microscope going into the details.
Yeah, you can say that, yes. But you can see that what is causing the duality, the subject, the object, is when we say, I am seeing something. You see that? Whereas initially there's only seeing, right? There's only seeing, only hearing, only tasting. You see?
Not into the details.
That's right.
Just a capture and
That's right. So it's a part of our conditioning, which is created by language. And again, this is one of the insights of the Buddha. He realized that there's no one behind it. There's actually no one actually who is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. As you said, the senses are actually sensing by themselves. But again, if you're on a retreat, you can see this more easily, right? Because you're very calm, very present, and you're not holding your smartphone, waiting to check your messages, right? You see this very clearly. There's only seeing here, and there's only eating, only smelling, only tasting, only hearing. And that's the profound message in the Heart Sutra, the Heart Sutra. Very profound teaching. How the 5 aggregates are empty. Maybe after lunch we'll speak about the 5 aggregates. It's very profound, but it's a wonderful teaching about these 5 things that are creating our experience here. Because normally we're not aware of them, but they're always there. They're always working, but we're not aware of them. And consciousness is one of the factors, consciousness. We speak about this after lunch. Because a lot of people believe that consciousness is permanent. And that when we die, consciousness by magic will take rebirth, right? Many people believe that. But that's not correct, because consciousness is not permanent. It's always changing, right? It's a part of the process that we are, mental, physical process. Part of the process. Yes, sir.
Hi, sir. I'd like to know more about, learn more about Rupa and Nama. May I know how do you spell it so I can search for more information
Yes.
on this?
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
Next weekend I'll be. I know next weekend it's a stay-in retreat, I think, but I'm not sure how many people will attend. But I'll be speaking about the Rupa and the Nama. When we're mindful, when we bring our attention to the present moment, awareness, we begin to see Rupa and Nama, meaning physical and mental phenomena or process. For example, you are not here this morning when we did the hand movements, right? You are not here. Yeah. But you've done mindful breathing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So when you're doing mindful breathing, when you're aware of the sensation of the breath, you feel your body breathing. Some people watch it here, but here it's more easy at first. That physical sensation is the body, right? Rupa, physical. And the awareness of the breathing and the sensation is the mind, right? That awareness, Nama. Understand? There's the physical and the mental. You can see it. So the next time you do mindful breathing, you can reflect on it. When your mind has calmed down, you can see the physical, the sensation, and the awareness of that, which is the mind. You see Rupa and Nama. That is the reality of who we are at a deeper level. But on the social level, I'm Mr. Go or Mr. Tan or Miss Tan and so on, or Bhante Kovida. But all that is social level. But there's a deeper reality of body and mind. Process. And as we said, we are this very complex process. And if we were not a process, we wouldn't be alive. Extremely complex. And I was saying to that, even the digestion process, when we eat, is very, very complex. But fortunately, we don't have to worry about it unless you're having a serious digestion problem. Because the body has that intelligence to take care of all that complexity. But you can see it in other practices, sometimes initially more easily. Like when you're walking, right? Mindful walking, the feet moving and stepping, that's the body, rupa. And the awareness of the feet moving and stepping is the mind, nama. You see, rupa and nama. Yeah, when you do something physical, it's easier to see initially. As I said, if you're just washing the dish, right, you see the physical sensation of washing, and the awareness of the washing is the mind. So you see rupa and nama. Rupa and nama. And if you happen to be washing something by hand, same thing. And eating, if you're eating lunch, eating mindfully in silence, you can see it. The tasting, chewing, and swallowing of the food is rupa, the body, the process of the body, and the awareness of the tasting, chewing, and swallowing is mind. You see rupa and nama. But on the social level, I'm always saying, I'm tasting the food, I like it, I don't like it, it's too salty, it need more chili or it need more soy sauce. So the duality, we don't see the truth of rupa nama. But it's very profound, and yet it's so basic, it's such a basic teaching. And as we said, we usually say, when there's a death, we say somebody dies, somebody passes away. But that is the social convention, social language. But the deeper reality is the process of body and mind simply shuts down. It just stops working. Very, very, very wonderful teaching. Very, very profound, but it's wonderful when you understand. But of course, it takes reflection. It takes mindfulness. And you see the reality of it. And you go even deeper than the 5 factors, the 5 aggregates. You have the 32 parts of the body. You go a bit deeper, you have the elements. Next week, I'll be speaking about the elements. Maybe tomorrow, if I have time, we'll go about the elements. It's a wonderful reflection. Because normally when we hear that we're composed of elements, earth, water, heat, air, space, and consciousness, is just an idea, a concept. But when you go through the body, certain parts of the body, and see which elements are involved, then the truth of the elements becomes very clear. And you realize we exist, we're alive because of these elements. That's right. And when you reflect on this teaching, on a more regular basis, you get to a point where you realize that we're just a collection of elements pretending to be people. Imagine that. We're just a collection of elements pretending to be people. One moment. And this collection of elements here, sitting here, is pretending to be Bhante Kovida from Canada. And your collection is pretending to be who you think you are. But in the end, it's all pretending. And if you really want to know what continues after death, which is the $1 million question, right? What happens after death, right? Where do I go? It's the elements. The elements go back to nature. That's right. And at a deeper level than the elements, we have atoms, atoms. Otherwise known as cosmic energy. Because everything is composed of atoms, right? Everything. And if you remember the first law of science that we all learned in high school, you remember that? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. You remember that? It can only change its form, and it can move from one place to another. Profound. But on that deep level of reflection, we're able to go beyond the idea of birth and death. Imagine that. On that deep, profound level of cosmic energy, atoms, we're able to go beyond the idea of birth and death. Very profound, but it's very beneficial. Very beneficial. But again, it takes time. When you reflect more and more, then the truth of this profound reality, it becomes very clear. The elements become very clear. The atoms, the reality becomes very clear. And what is really interesting, all the atoms in our bodies right now, they have been recycled many, many times. Can you imagine? Yes, many, many times. So actually, there are some atoms in our bodies right now that were in the bodies of dinosaurs, millions of years ago. That's right, think of it. They're all recycled. And because, we're 70% water, right? About 70%. A lot of our atoms were once in the sky. As water vapor, clouds, and rain. And in cold countries, as snow. And our atoms, they've been around the planet many, many times, because of the weather patterns, right? Yeah. It's a very scientific teaching because it's based on fact. It's based on facts, not just beliefs, ideas, concepts. Yeah. Just a minute. You had a question, right?
Bhante, I just want to kind of reflect on what your answer pertaining to free will. Can I deduce that there's no free will, it's just a process?
There's no?
There's no free will, as in it's a process or a kind of reaction?
I know many people speak about free will, but I don't speak about this free will because I think it's just an idea. It's just an idea.
So it doesn't exist. It's just a process, as in what we have as free will. In a way, it's like a process,
Well, you're free to think, right?
Yes.
If you're hungry and you can afford it, you're free to buy food, right? But during the lockdown, and in Malaysia it was very, very strict, you couldn't go outside, right? So what happened to free will then? It's just an idea. Don't take it seriously. I know many people like to talk about, philosophize about free will, but it's not important. It's not important. Yeah. Yes.
Referring back to what you mentioned just now about the energy in our body, atoms, it recycling since like dinosaur time and to now, does it mean now as the body is formed or is from the conception period? I'm a bit confused, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Don't worry, it's perfectly natural to feel confused.
Thank you.
But don't worry, you'll be enlightened one day. You'll be enlightened one day. Slowly, slowly. Remember now, patience is a virtue. Well, obviously at conception, then that's where it begins. All the elements start coming together and the cells multiplying and so on. But even conception, the conditions have to be right. The teaching about cause and conditions. Because, there are some couples You know, they want to conceive, but they cannot. The conditions are just not right. And it has nothing to do with, bad karma, from past life. No. The conditions are just not right. And sometimes there's conception, but the conditions are just not right in the womb, in the uterus. So that fertilized egg cannot grow into a healthy, fetus and to a baby. So there is miscarriage. It's something very natural, when the conditions are not right. And as you know, some babies die young, right? And before we had all this medical technology, many babies would die. And many couples would lose 2, 3, 4 babies sometimes, because they just didn't have, modern medical science. And most babies are, premature babies. Before all this advanced medical technology, most premature babies would die because they're just not strong enough to survive. Yeah. Cause and conditions. But you're right. When a fetus is growing, the elements, of course, help it to grow, right? In terms of food, right? Food, blood, nutrition, and so on. The earth element, water, space, heat, of course, heat element. Yeah, we'll do that another time. It's a very wonderful reflection on the elements, because it is a reality. It's not just a concept. Okay, at 11:30, I think it's time for mindful eating, right? Mindful eating. So try and see if you can see Rupa and Nama while you're mindfully eating, right? Remember, no, there's no I who is eating. Only Rupa Nama eating. And if you ask me who is speaking at the moment, Rupa Nama, Nama Rupa. Nama Rupa, Rupa Nama, speaking. The name Bhante Kovida is only a social label, only, social reality, social convention. Okay, so we meet at 1:30, yeah? We meet again at 1:30. So have a mindful, pleasant lunch, okay?